All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is where I cut the last video in half. So we are picking up exactly where we left off on there. We just got done talking about the skull and the vertebrae, and now we're going to talk about the thoracic cage, which is the fancy word for your ribs, and your limbs. All right, so good luck. Your thoracic cage is made up of your ribs and this bone in the middle. You know it as your breastbone. It's called your sternum. And because your ribs come out of your thoracic vertebrae, and you have 12 thoracic vertebrae, you have 12 bones on each side, right? 12 on both sides. That means 12 and 12, you have 24 ribs. And then the sternum in the middle. Notice this is colored in blue, right? Because that is not bone, that is cartilage, bendable cartilage. Now, because when you breathe, your lungs are going to inflate and your ribs need to expand to make up for that. So you have cartilage to allow for a little flexibility. Your pectoral girdle, we've talked about this a little bit earlier, made up of your clavicle and your scapula. Scapula is what holds onto your back, and clavicle reaching around to the front, acting as weight support for your upper limbs. I showed you this picture before, showing it to you again. Scapula, your shoulder blade, you know it as, sitting on your back. The clavicle, your collarbone, you know it, reaching around the front, and acting as weight support for your upper limbs. Speaking of your upper limbs, there are a couple bones that we need to talk about here. The first one is the one that we have been labeling in the very beginning. It is called the humerus. No, that's not your funny bone. I don't want to hear those jokes. The humerus is the bone in your upper arm. Your shoulder and your elbow are part of that bone. And then your forearm is actually made up of two bones called the radius and the ulna. If you look at it, these two bones, there is the radius, which is on the thumb side, and the ulna, which is on the pinky side of your hand. What's the point of having two bones in your forearm? Why not one? Well, take a look at this, guys. Remember, bones don't bend very easily, right? If it did, you would break them, but you need to be able to move. But your elbow is a hinge, like a door, which means it can only go in this one directional movement, up and down. And then your wrist can go like this and can go like this, but that's about it, right? But we have the ability to do this. And that's where your two bones come in. Go ahead and feel that. If you hold down here, you can try to feel the two bones. They don't move too well, but if you go up here, you can feel, like this, you can feel the two bones wrapping around each other. So that is the point of the two bones. The radius on the thumb side and the ulna on the pinky side are going to wrap around each other so that you can get this range of motion. And yes, I am going to expect you to memorize that. Know the difference between the radius and the ulna. And how you're going to do that? You're going to do that the way I remembered it. Way back in the 90s when I learned it, back when everyone was like talking like this, man, because we were totally like wanting to be surfers or whatever. Like, and they would do stuff like this, right? We got the thumb and the pinky is on the underside. Ulna, under. Totally works. All right, and then you're left with the thumb. What do we say with the thumbs up, man? Back in the 90s, radical. Totally radical. Radical radius. Oh, works so well. So like, that's how you're totally gonna do this. Radius to the thumb, ulna is under. Moving on down to your hand. We got the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Your carpals, those are your wrist bones. And yes, you have 8 individual bones in your wrist. No, I'm not going to make you memorize that. All right, I'm already giving you way too much as it is. I understand that. So I just want you to know that the carpals are your wrist bones. If you're interested in knowing the names of them, here they are. Go ahead and name them. All right. And then here, no, these are not finger bones. They look like fingers, right? No, they're not. Check this out. Let me overlap an actual hand. It doesn't really match up perfectly, but you get the idea here. Look at that. Those pink bones are not part of the fingers. Those are the bones inside the hand. Set it aside, you can see it. And then down here, yellow, purple, and blue, those are the finger bones. We know them as phalanges, and your phalanges are actually made up of 3 fingers each. If you remember the terminology from chapter 1, we talked about distal and proximal. Proximal means closer, distal means further. So these are your proximal phalanges, the yellow. The purple are your middle phalanges, and the blue are your distal phalanges. And here's a weird thing. There's only 2 in your thumb. You have proximal and distal. You don't have a middle. So when people ever ask you, why isn't a thumb considered a finger? There's your answer. Because fingers have 3 bones and the thumb only has 2 bones. All right, almost done, guys. Now we just got to talk about the hips and the lower limbs and we are good. All right. Your hips, your pelvis is made up of 5 different sections, and good news, we've already talked about 2 of them. Number 4 and 5, the sacrum and coccyx were part of your vertebral column. They're also part of your pelvis. They're pulling double duty here, so we only got 3 new sections to learn for this: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. Unfortunately, these pictures are not too good 2-dimensional. I think I have a 3D thing going. There it is. All right, this is your pelvis. Here we got your vertebral column, your sacrum and your coccyx, your tailbone there. And this is the front now. And we see that your pelvis looks like a butterfly. I didn't have a thing with butterflies today. It looks like a butterfly, and these are the butterfly wings. Those wings are called the iliums. And this is an ilium. It is there for protection. So you can hip check things without damaging your reproductive organs. And then your ischium, look down here, this circular bone underneath, right? That's the part you actually sit on. No, you don't actually sit on your sacrum or your tailbone. You'll break your tailbone that way. You sit on this round part called the ischium. And here's a question: why is there a hole in there? Because that's where your blood vessels go and your nerves go through there. That way you don't sit on your blood vessels and cut off circulation. Right? You don't lose feeling in your legs every time you sit down. That is a protective thing for you. So the round part is the ischium. And then when we come back around, here we go, right up here. This is the pubis. And then we go back to this, we see this picture, the red part here, your pubis is actually connected with a bit of connective tissue right there. And that is also known as you may also know it as your pubic bone. Anytime you have the word pubic, you guys are teenagers, all right? You've heard the word pubic before. You know what section of your body I'm talking about. That whole section will always use the word pubic. So your pubic bone, your pubic hair, your pubic region is all that same location. And then, of course, sacrum and coccyx we already talked about. All right, your lower limbs. Backtracking for a second. Connecting right here, see that red, that connection point? This ball joint, that is your femur. That is your thigh bone connecting to your hips. And it is the largest bone in your body. It is the thickest and strongest bone in your body. It's the hardest bone to break. It has a tremendous amount of weight support going on right there. And then you got your tibia and fibula underneath. Tibia is this big strong bone, for again, big for weight support. And then this little one off on the side called the fibula. Why do you have that? For the same reason you have 2 bones in your forearm. They wrap around each other and give you a little bit more range of motion. They're not as good as your forearm, but they work pretty well. Here's what's not in your notes. I'm adding this in just for your own information. The patella, your kneecap. Why do you have that? You feel it. You know your kneecap floats around a bit, right? It's not fully attached. It's not. It is held down by ligaments. So what is the point of a kneecap? You think it's there for protection? Maybe. But really, it's actually about movement. Yeah, believe it or not, that little piece of bone actually helps you lift your leg. Your kneecap, your patella, actually helps you lift your leg up. Show you what I mean with that, guys. This model here represents your femur and your tibia. And then this rock is your kneecap, your patella. And these are the tendons pulling on your tibia to lift your leg up. So as the tendon pulls, your tibia gets pulled up with it, right? Nice and simple. Why can't it do that without the kneecap? Well, let's take a look. As the tendon pulls, it's a weird physics thing. Like the angle is just too close to the fulcrum. Remember the levers we talked about before? The angle is just way too close to the fulcrum that it's not going to lift very easily at all. So evolution gave us a kneecap to push those tendons and ligaments out just a little bit further and give us a little less friction. And the last thing we're doing is the foot. So starting with the tarsals. These are your ankle bones. Just like with your wrist, they were called the carpals and you had 8 bones. Here you have the tarsals and you have 8 bones. And no, I'm not going to expect you to memorize those names. But don't get them confused. Carpals for your wrist. Remember, ever hear of carpal tunnel syndrome? Right? It's a wrist issue. And then tarsals with a T are closer to your toes. So with a T. So tarsals. And then your metatarsals, just like your metacarpals in your hand were not finger bones, they were actually hand bones. Your metatarsals are not toe bones. They are foot bones. And then your phalanges, again, this word is the same. This one doesn't change. Your fingers are known as phalanges and your toes are known as phalanges. And just like before, you have the proximal phalanges, the middle phalanges, and the distal phalanges. And your big toe, just like your thumb, does not have a middle phalange. So it is different. All right, guys, that is it for the skeletal system. Go back on Google Classroom, see if I left you any work to do. Contact me if you have any questions about anything at all, and I will see you in the next video.